Corey McLaughlin here from Stansberry Research with former Texas Governor Rick Perry and Secretary of Energy under Donald Trump, of course.
I couldn't keep a job.
Yeah.
Bounced around a lot in my life.
Well, you've had a few jobs.
All good.
That's good. You just got done with a great presentation up here at our conference here in Las Vegas on the future of energy in America. You also talked a little bit about your time working for President Trump.
Yeah.
Nuclear. Maybe we can touch on some of these things.
All of the above.
First thing, one of the things you talked about, the transition to green energy that's out there. You called it a fallacy, basically.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's a pipe dream at best. I consider it to be a hoax. The idea that you're going to transition everything over to electricity it's just not going to happen. Number one, you got to have a way to develop that electricity, and you're not going to do it with windmills and solar power. You're going to have most likely gas-driven, combined cycle plants and nuclear power. And we talked about small modular, and I know we'll probably get into that a little bit more. But you got to have the base load. Even my, wonderful, beloved Texas in 2021, we got really close to losing our grid because we relied too much on these renewables. Now, the legislature and the governor very wisely and I think visionarily said, we got to address this. And so in 2023, they put $5 billion into incentivize the building of peaker plants, which are gas-driven, that you can literally go out there and flip a switch and turn them on when you need them. And I think the next thing that's going to happen in the state will be small modular reactors are incentivized to be that base load power. And they're pretty hard to argue with. They're walk-away safe, they're economically feasible, and they're zero emission.
Yeah, when you started talking about nuclear, I saw people in the crowd.
I saw heads start
paying
nodding.
Attention, closer. Why are they so? Can you just explain how you see the positives of that, and what advantages do they have over? People see nuclear or hear about nuclear, they think the big plants.
Well, even take you back further than that. You're not old enough to remember the 1964 presidential election, but Barry Goldwater and Lyndon Johnson, and they had an ad that showed a mushroom cloud, nuclear bomb. And so people my age, nuclear was, a bomb. It was a weapon of war. It was bad. And then the fuel rods in the power plants, these big, massive, very expensive, long build-out periods of time nuclear plants, and you had to deal with that waste issue. And I think the government's done a very poor job of dealing with that. But none of that is connected to small modular reactors. The waste is minuscule. And I think American innovation, you'll see SMRs, small modular reactors, literally to the point of where there is no waste with these, either reburning the leftover waste in some form or fashion, or being able to, small amounts of it, being able to store it for, literally tens of thousands of years.
Yeah, you mentioned
safely.
Walk away safe was the word there. That's essentially, it can't melt down, right?
Well, and that's the problem. When you think about Chernobyl, you think about Fukushima, you think about 3 Mile Island, those were issues that happened to these big nuclear plants where they had basically a meltdown in those cases. So the new technology, and here's the fascinating thing, Corey, for me, is this isn't like something Buck Rogers we just came up with here to, Elon Musk didn't just come up with it to say, hey, we're going to use this to go to Mars.
Yeah.
They've been around for a long time. Our nuclear submarines are all driven by small modular reactors.
Right.
Our carriers today, small modular reactors. So this is the latest installment, if you will, of this technology that is safe, that is economical, and that is zero emission.
Makes a lot of sense given the AI, push and the energy.
How much power?
You mentioned that on stage.
These AI plants, the data centers, massive energy hogs.
Yeah.
And with an SMR, you literally can go site specific. You can, how much power you need? You need 1.2 gigs? All right, let's see. These are 250 each, bolt them together.
Yeah.
Here's 6, you're good to go.
Yeah. And of course, we're talking about nuclear, but you also made the case for fossil fuels generally.
Oh, absolutely.
Oil, gas.
Well, listen, we're
yeah.
going to be using fossil fuels, particularly natural gas, for decades in the future because it's relatively clean burning. It is incredibly abundant. We need to be shipping it out all across the world. I'm upset with the current administration because they basically put a halt on all of these LNG facilities for political purposes. I totally get this. This is the radical environmental activist that influences the Biden-Harris administration. But we need to be shipping this gas all around the world, displacing old, inefficient, coal plants.
Right.
Let's
an
go.
Opportunity.
Let's go get the Chinese to use American LNG rather than burning the nasty fuel. Because if your point is we've got a real issue in the world with the climate, that's the globe, and the United States is doing its part. Actually, we've cleaned up our climate substantially. I don't want to have to pay and see America, frankly, go bankrupt chasing this concept of we're going to have zero emissions by 2050, because you're not, because these other countries aren't going to participate as well.
Interesting, yeah. In my mind now, when you bring that up, I'm wondering, can that be some sort of bargaining chip in negotiations with
why not?
those other nations?
Let's have the conversations. Let's see how do we get them to use American product, American innovation. And again, I go back to, and I said this time after time, American innovation. If we'll just incentivize the American fertile mind, these universities, these places that are out, our national labs, go incentivize them to look at the ways to come up with new sources of energy, we'll do it.
Yeah, the people seem to want to do that.
Yeah.
So, all right, I want to ask you, you mentioned it on stage, obviously I'm sure you get this question a lot from people now. You're working for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
What was it like? You said people don't usually say, what was it like? So I'm going to ask
people ask me, what was it like in Washington, when actually what they're wanting to hear is what was working for Donald Trump like. And we had a really interesting and a good relationship. He looked at me somewhat as a peer. I'd been the governor of Texas. I'd run a big entity, and nobody's Donald Trump's peer. I don't get confused about that. Yeah. But he's incredibly smart. He's a very, very quick study. And he gave me, a few goals and then left me alone. And, I went off and did those goals. And my biggest project that he wanted me working on was to go sell American LNG around the world. Right. And we were incredibly successful at doing that. We became energy independent in 2000 and I think 18 or 19.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. It's good for the economy of this country. It's good for obviously jobs and the job security that comes with. It's good with allowing your allies to know America's going to be a reliable source of energy. Plus, we're taking old inefficient plants out of Europe, replacing it with clean burning American natural gas. I can promise you what's going on in Ukraine today is partly because of the Biden policies of stopping American LNG going over to Europe in copious amounts.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, obviously can't escape energy and geopolitics.
You can't escape energy with practically anything we do, whether it's transportation, whether it's manufacturing. I mean, tell me something that, I'm looking over there at a table and chairs and computers and plastic, and all of that comes from the fossil fuel industry. And this idea that we're going to be, net zero by 2050, it's a hoax, and it needs to be exposed for that. Listen, don't get me confused. I'm not the climate's not changing. Yeah, it's changing, and people have an effect on it. Americans and the world's use of fossil fuels has an effect on it.
Okay.
But they only want to talk about the negative things. Nobody wants to stand up and say, here's why the world is more livable today.
Right. And you actually mentioned Alex Epstein, who we had on our podcast.
Fabulously brilliant young man.
Yeah.
And who used to be on the other side of this issue until he studied it.
Right. Yeah.
And now
Human
he's become
flourishing. Like
yeah.
we can.
And that's the big issue from my perspective.
Yeah.
I don't know. You've got and I can't remember. I think it's like Camilla Thorndike or Thornbeck, or who is the climate person for Vice President Harris.
Gotcha.
And she's basically said that if you're in the fossil fuel business, you're an eco-terrorist, that you're a white supremacist, that you are for patriarchy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's radical.
Seems a bit of a stretch.
That's radical stuff right there.
Yeah.
And that is the person that's the closest to Mrs. Harris today on the climate issues. As a matter of fact, less than a week ago, she went on one of the major networks and said that she was, and that Kamala Harris was not going to be for promoting more drilling. Now, they've been stepping that back all week long because she stepped in it because she's told the truth.
Right.
And that's what the American people need to understand, is that this administration is not telling you the truth about fossil fuels, not telling you the truth about their position. They are out there absolutely telling whatever they think they need to tell, particularly to the people of Pennsylvania, which is a massively important fossil fuel developing state, what they think they want to hear, so they'll vote for them.
That never happens, of course.
Never.
Tell people what they want to hear.
I've
to
never heard
votes,
of that
right?
happening
Yeah.
before. But my point is, if you want to have a future that is comfortable, that still has air conditioning,
Right.
still has the lights on 24/7, you better have a base load, can only be delivered one of two ways: fossil fuels or nuclear power.
Very good. What did you most learn as Secretary of Energy, either about the energy industry itself in America, or just, again, going back to working with the White House?
Yeah. What was most apparent to me as a Secretary of Energy didn't have anything to do with the energy industry. It had everything to do with the national labs and the crown jewels that these entities are, dealing with a host of different areas, whether it's in potentially finding the battery storage answer, that if renewables are going to be reliable, they're going to have battery storage. We're working on that at a number of our labs. The AI side of the world. I mean, the national labs are involved in so many areas outside of the energy industry as we think about it today. And those men and women and what they do and the quality of life issues that they work on, the ability to keep us free, keep us safe. The Department of Energy is some of those silent warriors out there doing an extraordinary job.
Interesting. And then, do you have any desire to get back into kind of national politics?
Yeah, I don't.
Should Trump win another term?
I've done this for 40 years.
Yeah.
I became part of the legislative process in Texas in 1985. That's approaching 40 years.
Yeah.
So I had a good go of it. I passed on to the president and his supporters that, I will help them in any way I can. From my lips to God's ear, Donald Trump is elected president of the United States for a lot of different reasons, the least of which is not he will have very, very capable, knowledgeable men and women working with him. And I think for national security purposes, I think for economic purposes, I think for just people's lives in general, his administration would be better than an alternative. And so, but I shared with them, I will stand on the sidelines and cheer them on, help any way that I can. And there's a lot of very talented men and women out there that could do any job I would be qualified for. And I'll help them identify any of them, but I'm done.
All right, sounds good. All right, that wraps it up for this exit interview with former Texas Governor Rick Perry.